Hi everybody, I'm Joey Hollywood, and today I'm reviewing Lake Placid Legacy. That's right, they made another one. Kind of funny though, considering the last standalone Lake Placid movie was called Lake Placid: The Final Chapter. And I don't know, I guess we should have saw this coming because that movie had characters that followed into the next film, which was Lake Placid versus Anaconda. But, you know, I don't know why they even call horror movies the final chapter anymore, because it never is, and I think everyone knows it at this point. Now, before we get into the latest installment, I want to take a brief moment to talk about the history of the Lake Placid and Anaconda movies, before we get into the newest one.
1997's Anaconda involved a documentary crew going into the jungle on a boat looking for a lost tribe. This is where they meet John Voight, who terrorizes them into catching a giant anaconda. 1999 saw the release of Lake Placid, which involved a quirky group of people trying to catch Betty White's giant pet crocodiles. Anaconda's Hunt for the Blood Orchid was the first and only sequel of either franchise to be released theatrically. Anaconda's introduces the Blood Orchid, which is a MacGuffin that cures cancer and prolongs life, and is also the reason why those anacondas get so dang big. Lake Placid 2 is the first direct-to-video sequel in the Lake Placid series, and it's pretty much a low-budget remake of the first movie. Anaconda 3 Offspring features David Hasselhoff and Crystal Allen trying to track down a giant mutated anaconda. This movie introduces the evil corporation that's trying to unlock the secrets of the Blood Orchid, and they're not afraid to give anaconda scorpion tails to do it. Lake Placid 3 introduces Yancey Butler, who becomes the main character of the Lake Placid series from this point on, and is honestly the best part of these direct-to-video sequels. Anaconda's Trail of Blood is the last standalone Anaconda movie, which has Crystal Allen fighting an anaconda with regeneration powers and tries to shut down the evil corporation for good. Lake Placid: The Final Chapter sees the return of Yancey Butler, and the introduction of Robert Englund in another standout role in the series. And finally, it all comes down to Lake Placid versus Anaconda, which has Yancey Butler and Robert Englund from the Lake Placid series, and the evil corporation from the Anaconda series, all wrapped up in a gloriously stupid plot about a giant crocodile fighting a giant anaconda.
But this one ends on a cliffhanger. You see, these two titans of failed monster movie franchises made it. And the next movie is going to have crococondas. Now enter Lake Placid Legacy, which doesn't have crococondas. In fact, it ignores everything I just told you. It's a reboot. And I bet you're wondering why I just went through the entire history of these movies if this film just ignores them. Well, there's two reasons for that. One, to really hit home that the title Lake Placid Legacy is horribly inappropriate. This film ignores not only the legacy of the direct-to-video sequels, but it ignores the original film itself. And I'm not just talking about continuity, I'm talking about tone too. These films have very little in common. The second reason is something that I'll get into a little bit later. Now, the Lake Placid movies have notoriously bad Photoshop jobs on their covers. I think the worst one was Lake Placid versus Anaconda. I'm serious, I want that as a poster. That is just gloriously bad. It's just so awful. I love it. However, Lake Placid Legacy, I think, is the first sequel to have a decent looking cover. Heck, I think it actually tops the original. I really like the idea of it, a single boat driving into the jaws of an island that resembles a giant croc. It looks really cool. I just wish I loved the movie as much as the poster.
Lake Placid Legacy opens up with our protagonist sitting in a van plotting to expose some corporation of poisoning whales. They're introduced as adrenaline junkies and environmental activists. One of these forgettable characters has a sister who is a journalist documenting their illegal exploits. Apparently their big plan is putting a banner on the side of a building.
So all this just to put a banner on the side of a building. What does that even get you? It makes the evening news.
Yeah, right. As soon as they see that thing on the building, they're going to cut it down before the news... I stand corrected. This scene is kind of weird for two reasons. Well, one, it looks like they're on a spaceship rather than some sort of business skyscraper. I mean, with all those neon lights and pictures of space on the wall, geez Louise, Star Trek had less sci-fi looking sets. And that show took place in the future. The second weird thing about this scene is it's intercut with a guy running, presumably from a giant croc. I mean, there's just no setup or connection between these two events happening. Oh man, that has to be the laziest title card of the whole franchise. I don't think I can accurately describe how lazy this title card is, so I'll just show you. They didn't even bother moving the legacy to make it look more aesthetically pleasing. And after that hilariously bad title card, we are introduced to our main characters. Here we have Jade and Alice, sisters who probably won't die, Sam who might die, Billy who will probably die, and Spencer who you really want to die. They're celebrating their final conquest of illegal, adrenaline-injected environmental activists. Okay, I'm going to try to read this one more time. They're celebrating their final conquest of illegal, adrenaline-injected environmental activism. No matter how you say that, it just sounds lame. Sam sets up the premise that each time they do one of these things, they put a pin in some sort of map on a forum. I know it kind of sounds convoluted, but this is how they get them to Lake Placid. Although it's never actually referred to as Lake Placid in this movie. Some guy Sam used to know sends him a vlog, taunting him to go to this place that isn't on any map. One last act of environmental something or another. And that pulls in the team, and now we got a movie. They team up with two guys who constantly complain about not wanting to be part of their illegal activity, and yet still take part in everything.
Whoa, isn't that illegal? You okay with this, man?
Look, we're just the hired hands. If they want to be rebels and break the law, it's on them.
You know, just because you wave your hands and say, I don't want any part of this, but still continue to follow these guys and help them as they continue to break the law, you're still an accessory. You know that, right? I have to admit, the area that this movie shot in looks a lot more like the Lake Placid of the original film than any of the sequels. But the only connection between this movie and any of the previous ones is this electric fence. That isn't electric.
Dangerous. No! Whoa, no! Help him! No! Whoa!
Come on. The look on your face was priceless.
Just kill that man already. They get to a small island in the middle of the lake and they find a GoPro with some Blair Witch type footage on it. Oh, and they also find a dead body. They realize, far too late, that they should get the hell out of there. But an unseen croc kills their boat. Poor boat. Oh yeah, and one of the guides is killed. I didn't really know them anyways, they just complained.
Now, they're stuck on the island.
But don't worry, they're not going to be attacked just yet. You see, the CGI would look way too bad in the daylight, so the crocs are going to wait until nighttime to attack them.
They descend into the tunnels where the surviving guide elaborates more on the backstory of this area and further distances this movie from the original and its sequels.
My daddy talked about these mysterious boats coming and going from the islands at night. Strange corporate types passing through town. They sure were up to something, but then it all got shut down.
Yeah, that didn't really happen. Now that they're in the tunnels, though, they can spend the rest of the movie running through them, away from a crocodile. They split up and eventually get killed off one by one. Billy gets his head bit off while looking through a circular window. And the way it's executed, it looks like he just stuck his whole head out the window. Like, that's the only way this could have happened. But this, of course, leads to one of my favorite effects in these kind of movies. The bloody mat over an actor's head. Classic. Probably my favorite kill in this movie is when this person is in a tunnel, lit only with a flare, but only because it kind of reminds me of that episode of Kolchak the Night Stalker. They eventually meet up with this guy who reveals that the crocs are the result of some sort of mad science. When this guy popped his head into the movie, I swear I thought it was Bill Burr. Now, hear me out on this. The original Lake Placid movie has their comic actor, Betty White. it only made sense that they would have a funny actor in this movie. I mean, the second one had Cloris Leachman. The third one had Robert Englund, who I guess isn't really a comic actor, but he was the funny actor in that one. So it only made sense that they would get a funny actor for this third movie. But ends up, this is not Bill Burr. This is Joe Pantoliano. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. Renowned character actor. Making a funny actor play this role would be a little too much like Lake Placid, so of course they got to distance themselves from that.
Look, I never really liked you, Billy, but you had the school's computer system that time?
Yeah.
You know, changed my grade so I got my baseball scholarship? Yeah. You know, well, that's when I knew.
What?
God made geeks for a reason.
Please, just kill him. Please. Oh. Thank you, movie. Well, everyone dies, except for the sisters. Jade and Alice have to work together to blow up the croc, and once they do, they leave the island, but not before some sequel bait. Man, I can't wait for the sequel, Lake Placid History, which ignores the original film, its sequels, and this reboot. I'm looking forward to that. You know, here's a serious question. How could these crocs survive without Betty White feeding them cows? All right, here's the second reason why I brought up the history of the Lake Placid and Anaconda films. I think this was originally intended to be an Anaconda movie. Hear me out on this. The only real connection that this movie has with the original film or the sequels is the electric fence. And it's not even electric in this movie.
Not even an energy source.
And to top it off, it doesn't really even seem to be taking place in Lake Placid. This movie could take place anywhere. But the biggest reason why I feel like this was originally intended to be an Anaconda movie was the involvement of an evil corporation. Like I said before, the evil corporation played a big part in Anaconda 3, 4, and the Versus movies. The croc is even a man-made monster, like the Anaconda became later in the series. If you go through a checklist of all the tropes that make up a Lake Placid or Anaconda movie, you'll notice that this movie checks in all the Anaconda boxes more than anything else. Even the plot would have made a bit more sense. Like if they went to this place looking for a blood orchid instead of environmentally fueled activism, it just would have flowed a lot better. If this was originally meant to be an Anaconda movie that was changed into a Lake Placid movie, I'm guessing it's because the Lake Placid title might pull in more money. But if that's the case, why don't they just make Lake Placid Crocaconda? I think I'm the only person that wants that. Lake Placid Legacy, it's a mixed bag. For one, there's no Crocaconda, so that's like negative 500 stars right there. No, really, Sci-Fi Channel, if you're watching, I will direct Lake Placid versus Anaconda 2, Dawn of the Crocaconda. Call me. I think Legacy's strongest point is the cinematography. This is the best looking Lake Placid movie since the original. Even the CGI is handled a little bit better. With the croc always being hidden by smoke or darkness, it looks fine, very serviceable. Unfortunately, the characters are forgettable. Even at its worst, the Lake Placid sequels had at least one character that stuck with me. I did not experience that or care about any of these people in this movie. I think the biggest problem with Lake Placid Legacy is it ignores the legacy of its namesake. And I'm not just talking about continuity, I'm talking about the tone too. I expect a certain thing from Lake Placid, and I did not get that with this movie. The tone of Lake Placid Legacy is very, very serious, with little to no comic relief. And this is in conflict with the tone of the original. Lake Placid had a group of quirky characters that when all together was pretty funny. At least in my opinion, the movie never took itself too seriously. Like it knew that its plot was ridiculous. And though not as successful, at least the direct-to-video sequels tried to keep that self-aware attitude alive. And what we have left is not a very memorable entry in either series, Lake Placid or Anaconda. If I were to rank these movies from most enjoyable to least enjoyable, Lake Placid 2 would still be on the bottom, but Anaconda's Trail of Blood and Lake Placid Legacy would be fighting for that second lowest spot. Well, thank you for watching my review of Lake Placid Legacy. It really means a lot to me. I hope you enjoyed it. And I plan on having a new episode of Joey's Movies out every Friday for the first 6 months of 2019. So I'll see you next week. And remember, please be kind and rewind.
Why are you doing this? What are you doing? What are you doing? Oh.
Hey, Dad, you recording? You recording, Dad?
Oh my god. Oh my gosh. I'm gonna have so much cat hair on me. Oh my gosh. Why are you doing this? That's right. They made another one. I love you, Quentin, but holy mother of God.